it's important that you know that torture is not an effective means of retrieving information. But if you've ever consumed Western media, you probably don't know that. Depending on what survey you look at, in the US, somewhere between half and 2/3 of USians believe that torture is acceptable to be used against terror suspects. Between half and 2/3 find it acceptable. That's not even considering the percentage who find it unacceptable, but still believe at a base level that you can torture someone and get reliable information out of them. Which, as I will get to later in this video, is a false belief and one that intelligence officers the world around are very well aware of. But if it's false, why do so many of us feel in our guts that, like, yeah, if my daughter was taken hostage, I would torture someone to get the coordinates to save her? Why do we think that works? Because we're indoctrinated from a very young age to believe in the efficacy of torture. In a research study called Wait, There's Torture in Zootopia? Researchers found that 60% of movies released between 2008 and 2017 had at least one torture scene. More than half of movies have torture in them. There were even 58 torture scenes in PG-rated movies and 9 torture scenes in G-rated movies. Yes, they torture a fox in Zootopia. Despite the fact that evidence suggests that torture does not work at retrieving information, the media often shows that it does. Along with the finding that movies generally show torture to be effective, the researchers found that torture was more acceptable and necessary when perpetrated by the protagonist, and more harsh and unjustified when conducted by the antagonist. Protagonists are more likely than antagonists to use instrumental torture and less likely to use punitive torture. So they're more likely to torture someone to try to get information, which again, doesn't work, rather than just to punish them or be sadistic and satisfy their evil desires. And by the way, in case it's been a while since English class, protagonist means main character, antagonist means bad guy. Okay, so the researchers found protagonists, main character, are more likely to torture in response to threat, and when they do, they are more effective than antagonists. Further, while antagonists tend to torture more vulnerable people, protagonists do not. Overall, movie depictions of torture further propagate the narrative that the good guy tortures out of necessity to gain information that successfully averts disaster. This is particularly troublesome because protagonists exist as a means for viewers to see themselves in the film's core story. Therefore, the actions taken by protagonists may simultaneously reflect and crystallize societal attitudes about torture and its social acceptability. Yeah, particularly when it's like 5-year-olds with no critical media awareness watching the protagonist be successful at torturing someone who's a bad guy and get information out of them that like saves the day. That's some good torture propaganda PR. In addition to finding torture in movies, you'll find it in video games like Metal Gear Solid and Grand Theft Auto. But evidence is conclusive, and like US intelligence officers these days are well aware that if you need reliable information from someone, the last thing you should do is torture them. In Shane O'Mara's Why Torture Doesn't Work, the Neuroscience of Interrogation, he reviews existing neuroscience and psychology studies on torture and concludes that the effects of torture may in fact be exactly the opposite of what they are intended and claimed to be. Memory is reconstructive rather than reproductive. Our recollection of life events fits newly acquired information into a framework of prior knowledge, expectations, and biases. At best, our memories are not entirely accurate. In extreme cases, they can be misleading or even totally false. Rather than facilitating memory recall, stressors experienced under torture can break people's brains, basically. The physical pain inflicted upon them, the sleep deprivation, make them more susceptible to false memories and have a hard time distinguishing between reality and fantasy. Thus, while torture does make captives more likely to confess, the information obtained is not likely to be accurate and could be fabrication. A broken captive will almost certainly be extremely confused to the point where he may be unable to distinguish fact from fantasy and could very well tell his interrogators what they want to hear in hopes that they will stop torturing him. And in fact, non-coercive forms of interrogation are much more effective than coercion. If someone abducted your daughter and you needed to find the location of the coordinates, torturing that person makes it much less likely that you're going to be able to get accurate information. Bringing that person a cup of coffee and talking to them and just, offering them a plea deal, playing a good cop, you're going to be much more likely to get good information. Which brings us, of course, to Israel. It's vital when we're talking about the mass torture of Palestinian hostages by Israel that we are all clear on the fact that there is no purpose to this torture besides punishment and sadism and terrorism. And I guarantee you, the Israeli intelligence officers, at least the high command, they are well aware that they are not getting any reliable information about Hamas from this mass torturing. It is just about punishing and terrorizing and satisfying their own sadism and desire for revenge upon people's bodies, including the bodies of children, because there are children like Ahmad Manasra, who was arrested when he was 13 and has been subjected to Israeli torture for 9 years. There is no point to this torture. There's no information gathering. It's just about punishment and sadism. Is torture effective as a punishment? I mean, it hurts, but a bigger question about punishment is, does punishment change behaviors? But I know y'all aren't ready for the research on that, because even though we have like 100 years worth of research showing that punishment, particularly physical punishment, is detrimental to children's behavior and life outcomes and just about every metric you can find, fully 80% of American parents continue to spank their children. And even non-physical punishment just leads kids to continue doing behaviors in secret and lie about them and break trust with the parent rather than changing those behaviors. Similarly, like in Israel, when you have people asserting their rights non-violently and you meet that non-violent effort with incredible violence and torture and punishment and killing, those people will continue fighting and organizing for their rights, but in secret, and it's more likely to be a violent resistance that you're now facing. In that way, Israel has created Hamas. They have created the conditions for violent resistance, and Donald Trump's brutal crackdown and violent deportations of students, of kids who were just trying to say that genocide is bad in the US, is going to create the conditions for more violent forms of resistance here in the US. So torture is not effective at retrieving information. It's not going to be effective at stopping resistance. So its only purpose is satisfying the sadism, the desire to inflict pain on another person's body from the people doing the torturing. That's it. That's what torture is all about. And that's bad. Torture bad. Genocide bad. That's the name of my book. It's coming out with Interlink Press, the only Palestinian-owned press in the US, on April 22nd. We're in the last few weeks before you can pre-order it, and all those pre-orders will go into first week sales and determine whether or not this book is a bestseller. So find the links to pre-order in my bio. And if you're in Massachusetts or New York, I'm doing a little book tour the first week in May. You can find tickets at the link in my bio too. Come out and see me. And please comment and share this video to spread the word, because I feel like way too many people are under the impression that torture, at least when cute little zoo animals do it, is justified and or effective.